to mention her. She's defeated 2 grandmasters already. Yesterday with a spectacular win against Frederick Swane. And one player who's been spectacular this last year is in front of us, Gukesh. He's arrived, and a scene that we've become familiar with. He goes into that meditation Zen mode, pull back, getting locked in. Let's do it. Never a bad idea to check out on the 18th at 18. He starts with the black pieces in this one. He's playing against Sarana, the Piranha, who's always known to be razor sharp and prefers those attacking position. And perhaps he hasn't managed to get exactly that in this game, because look at how this progressed. It started with the queen's pawn opening, and we see the queen's gambit decline. So a very solid approach by Gukesh in this game. The bishop comes out to e7, and there we've got an invitation to go into, well, some sort of a Catalan structure if you were to take on c4. After g3, shot castle, the bishop comes out on the diagonal, and knight c6. Does this move surprise you, Jovanka?
I've seen it before, but it's very thematic in the sense that the whole idea is to take on c4 and prepare some kind of e5 ideas, or just to put pressure on the center on d4. It does surprise me because Gukesh faced a similar idea against Fabiano Caruana in last year's Olympiad, and Gukesh this time was with the white pieces and he won a fantastic game. Now, one of the pitfalls with putting a knight in front of your own pawns like that is that you could saddle yourself with the backward pawns. So for instance, white could be taking on d5, developing the dark square bishop, putting a rook onto the c line, and if that knight is forced to stay in front of his own pawns, then strategically black is really in big trouble. So I'm not surprised, because Gukesh wants to win, right? Sarana, despite being a fantastic grandmaster, he's certainly on the lower end of the tournament rating. So maybe he will try for more against such a player, but we'll see how it continued.
I think that's exactly the explanation of this, well, slightly non-standard move, because usually the black knight finds itself on d7, keeping it flexible for the c pawn to move ahead. And also there's a reaction of just taking the pawn, the free pawn, for the time being on c4. But he chose to move knight c6, sort of going into offbeat territory, something that we've seen Gukesh do with a lot of ease, even during the World Championship match. The knight jumps to the center of the board, and I think that's a very direct way of handling knight to c6. Alexey, he takes back with the pawn, hits that knight, forcing that knight to go to d7, and right now Gukesh is giving up the d5 pawn for the e5 pawn. In return, we saw that being played out. Pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, and now another pawn was grabbed. The center has liquidated for the players. The bishop comes out, and look at this. Alexey, in fact, does take the bait. He picks up the gambit. Bishop takes pawn on the board.
I know it was preparation at some point, but it was just amazing. Then we had Prag. He's a cool customer. He was in boss mode against Mendonça. And then, of course, I mean, how would you describe Arjun Erigaisi? That was
brilliant game. You make these incredible moves, you do everything right, and then one slip, one moment is all it takes for it to come to nothing. It reminds me of Anish is lost to Gukesh in round 1, where you're so close to kind of creating your own masterpiece. Instead, you create a game that's going to haunt you for a long, long time.
Yeah, and here we see players just following.
Only move, by the way.
Really?
Only move. You're not in time. Bishop to d5. Really, he's about to play and he makes it. He finds it. And he would not have been in time otherwise if king b6, bishop.
Absolutely. And it was so important that the pawn crossed the c4 square, and there we see. And now it's going to be queen and bishop versus queen c3.
Bishop h7 would have been a big blunder. You don't want to give that away. Once again, this was the only way to move forward. Sacrifice that bishop. And then white's king will be out in the open. Lots of checks. Either white will lose the bishop or trade queens. And Jovanka, I think in a few moves, this one will fizzle out into a draw.
And there you go. We have the handshake, a draw. Wow. What a game. A lot of adventure in this game. It looked like it was going to be an easy draw for both players, but in the end it got complicated. There were adventures to be had, there were twists and turns. It wasn't a perfect game by any means, but boy, did the players display that fighting spirit. But there you see the players analysing. And like you said, Tanya, life is perfect when it can be seen backwards. It's so heartwarming to see